Welcome to Beyond the Build, a new series from Shopify where we share stories behind the Shopify ecosystem, a platform where founders, developers, and innovators come to build for more than 1.7 million merchants worldwide. And today on the show, we have Karen Baker, the founder and CEO of ShipperHQ. ShipperHQ is a Shopify shipping app that helps you take control of your online shipping experiences at checkout. Karen is infamous for doing things differently, questioning the norms and processes, and then she instills this type of challenger mindset within her team. Thank you so much for joining me, Karen.
Thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me on. I feel kind of humbled being here. I don't know that I deserve that, but I really appreciate you inviting me. Thank you.
Oh, we're so grateful and excited to have you. Karen, so I'm starting a lot of these episodes with just wanting to hear like the origin story behind ShipperHQ and you yourself as a founder.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I try not to tell this anymore because I feel like everybody probably knows it now. But I have a computer science degree by background, so I'm on the nerdy side of tech. I used to work in foreign exchange up in London in Canary Wharf back in 2008. My husband was looking after the children. I was the major wage earner, so that's how we decided to cut it. And they were 1 and 3, and I've got to say he was not enjoying the 1 and 3 years. So one day I kind of said to him as you do in relationships, like, well, sod it, I'll go into work and just ask for a year off, thinking that they would never give me a year off. But that was just when the whole diversity thing was kicking in. And they said, yeah, take a year off. And so there I was with 2 children and a husband at home. And he was selling on eBay. And I launched, basically, the children were great, but I'm definitely a worker. And I needed something to do. So I said, I'll launch an e-commerce site. So, I built an e-commerce site and solved the shipping problems in England. A lot of people started reaching out to me because I put it on some forums. And they basically said, well, can you solve my problem? And can you solve their problem? And everything kind of went crazy from there. And, we're in 2021 now. And ShipperHQ, I moved to America in 2013. ShipperHQ launched in 2015. Shopify was one of the platforms that we first went on with ShipperHQ. It's been a crazy ride and really interesting to watch you guys growing up at the same time that we've been growing up.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot in there. Like, take me back to that first moment. You kind of skipped over it, but it must have been a really hard decision for you to be the primary breadwinner and deciding to take a year off with kids and also start experimenting with entrepreneurship all at the same time.
Yeah. I don't know that I really knew what I was walking into, right? But I think honestly, the taking a year off wasn't too bad. Like, we at the time, I had a good job and we could afford to do that. We were definitely living. It was like making stews and let's live cheaply kind of year, right? But we managed through it. But I think the big thing was just. I've always been interested in stuff and doing stuff, and I love my children, but I'm a better parent when I'm working. And I realized that in that time that I had off, but the jump into, leaving my job, because I went back after 9 months. I actually rang up my manager and was like, I've had enough. I need to come back to work. Like, please, can you ring me and make it look like you need me back? And he was like, yeah, come back. So I went back. And, my husband was like, I was like, I've got to go back. It's kind of, they need me kind of thing. But really, I wanted to get back to work. So I've always been a worker. But yeah, after kind of that, everyone just kept contacting me. So I had the children, the husband, the job, and people contacted me. And it was just one day I was on the tube and I was like, something's got to give. Like, I can't do all of these things. And I never wanted to start my own company. I was never thought myself as an entrepreneur. Even now, I don't think of myself as an entrepreneur. But it was just. I just decided and got off the tube and again rang my husband and said, hey, I'm packing my job in. And he was like, oh my God. And that's what I did. And within 2 days, I had a 3-month notice period, but I kind of managed to scam around that a little bit. Within 2 days, I was out and I needed to earn £100 a day is what I worked out that I needed. And I just put my kid in private school. Everyone thought I was crazy. But I was like, I believed in e-commerce. I loved working with customers. Like when you work in trading systems, you're not really working with customers. Right. And I really enjoyed just that interaction and how e-commerce was. And I felt that I could make a difference as well.
You and I chatted a little bit about this when we talked last week, but it's funny because like I think people sometimes associate like technology entrepreneurs with a certain demographic, and like you're coming into this industry as maybe like your second career, and like what has that experience been like?
It's pretty interesting. We were talking about this because you were saying about yourself running a company in your 20s, right? And I never would have imagined that. When I was in my early 20s, my mother died and I had to leave uni and go back, and I went to work, and I just wanted security at that point in my life, and I felt very alone, and working for somebody else and then paying me money was just, to me, just the greatest thing ever, right? And doing a job that I enjoyed was, so for many years I was extremely happy working for somebody else, and I loved like the fact that they would send me on a plane. I was like, this is amazing. But I think I reached a point where with that security side where I kind of looked at it with my children and my husband, and I was like, I wanted to spend more time with the kids, right? But and be there and not be up in London. He used to say, can you come back later so that after I've put them to bed, because you're disturbing their bedtime, because I was so chaotic, right? I'd come in and be, let's all wake up, like the dad does, right? I'd be like that, and he was like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, well, what is this? And I think that was one of the real things that drove me to just do things differently, and also just seek, strangely, because you take greater risk, but I've tried to also seek greater security for my family, because I know that that's all they've got is me. And I think that one of my driving things, people used to say, what is your driving motivation, when I used to talk to mentors and stuff, and I'd say it's security. It's not climbing Everest. It's not being the biggest company in the world. It's not fame or power or money. It's just security. Right. And that drives a lot of my decisions, honestly.
And how do you think that's trickled into like the business decisions too? Like, have you, starting ShipperHQ, were you like, I want to make this, a profitable business for me and my family, or I want to scale this into a big venture? I know you recently raised some money as well. Yeah, because I'd love for you to share that.
No, I haven't raised. We haven't raised any money. A lot of people think we raised money, but that was actually Shippo. A lot of people have been congratulating me on raising money, but there is another female CEO in the shipping space.
Yeah, we spoke earlier this week too.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it does shape your decisions. When you're younger, I think you can take much more risk because you don't necessarily have the mortgage. Some people are staying at home with their parents. They don't have children to look after. Like the whole risk factor changes. Like for me, like I like to have cash in the bank, and I like to be able to sleep at night. And I don't necessarily need to drive a Ferrari, but I want to be able to pay my mortgage, right? So I can take a certain amount of risk, but at a certain point, then it stops. And I think it has driven how we've grown, and it's also driven the decisions around taking on investment, because you have to decide in risk who you trust and what you trust, and whether or not you trust other people more than you trust yourself and your mission. And I think that's for me, fundamentally, I don't have imposter syndrome, and I do trust myself. And I know that sounds a little arrogant, but it's not arrogance. It's just I analyze things on a maths level and go, can you do a better job than me? Can you bring something to the table? And I add it all up. And at the end of it, so far, I haven't been able to say that somebody else could come in and do that. I think it's more risk than reward for me right now. But that may well change. And, we often talk to investors, and the numbers change, and, things change, right?
Right, totally.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, okay, so take me a little bit through the ShipperHQ journey itself. So you mentioned earlier that it kind of started out of your husband having an online store, and you were building something for his e-commerce business. So at what point did that transition into like, we want to make this a product and we want to scale it out and distribute it to?
So the first employers were 2010. So I packed in work in 2009 full time. So and then we were doing it as kind of one-off downloads, right? So for open source platform. So this was before we went on Shopify. But quite early on, I realized that SaaS was the way to go. And I was watching the Shopify story and other SaaS businesses in the space and was like, we're missing a trick, because we were selling these kind of zip files effectively as one-offs. So we had over 70,000 merchants using our software, for 25, 30,000 paying customers on that solution.
Right.
But it was like, how do you build this SaaS solution, right? And build it without investment. So basically what I used to say to my accountants was, how little do I need to earn in order for me to concentrate on what is now ShipperHQ? And they thought I was absolutely insane. Yeah, they were like, Karen, you're literally turning away business. And I was like, yes, because time is more important. And I'm a developer and an engineer and an architect, and you roll up your sleeves. And we rolled up our sleeves hard in like 13, 14, 15, and even today we do. I don't code so much anymore, but I still dabble. Yeah. Can't quite give up it's like yoga. Can't quite give it up.
I love it. So when would you say was like your, you're saying at some point you were turning away customers. So like, what was that inflection point where you started to really see that scale?
Yeah, well, it's like sometimes you have to know when to say no, and you have to look at your long-term vision. Like, look, even we threw away our old brand, Webshop Apps. We knew we needed to go multi-platform. We knew that Shopify was, we were watching the numbers on it, and we were crunching the numbers on how an app could do, and we were looking at the science of that and knowing that we needed to get over there. So when we hit the market, it was interesting for us coming from a different community into Shopify and really learning like how the Shopify ecosystem works and the needs of Shopify merchants, because it is different. And Shopify does think differently, but there's a magic in that as well. But I think for us, like you say, well, when is success? Well, I don't know. I mean, like, we're still walking a walk, right? Like, I don't know that there's a real inflection point. I think there's a point where you go, I can afford to buy a bottle of champagne now. Maybe that's success. I don't know. But I remember once actually being at a conference and not buying a bottle of champagne, and we'd done some crazy stuff. And then I thought, why am I not buying that bottle of champagne? Like, let's just buy it and expense it, It was like, but I haven't got that mindset, right?
That's fair. I mean, success can look a whole lot of different ways. It's just figuring out what it means to you, right?
Yeah.
Which is the most important thing.
Success in lots of ways, I think, is about time and enjoying the journey. And it's not about being in the news, or it's not about being the best at something. But I will say this, I want to be the best for my customers, and that matters. So I want to be able to look at my customers, my partners, my staff in the face and have integrity. But I don't think that's so much success. That's about having good morals, and I just want to sleep at night. It comes back to that.
So in your journey with ShipperHQ, like, are there any moments, like hard sort of fail forward learning moments that you'd want to share with listeners that are learning from your experience?
Yeah, I think that transitioning from being a developer into being a CEO is a hard journey. That is a continual journey of discovery, and realizing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and being able to push away the stuff that maybe you're not so smart at. Like, I think that it's a big transition. I know there's probably a lot of people that are going to be listening that are developers that are also, single owners or have a couple of people. And I'll say that you've got to give away the things you're best at, which is kind of weird as well, right? So like me giving up engineering was a big challenge, because that is my happy place. But you can't steer a ship and be down rowing, underneath. And there's a certain point at which you also have to accept with the staff that you can't always stand next to them all the time, because you've got to set out a strategy. And I think that for me there's been times of failure in that where I've not managed to do that. I've not known, should I go downstairs or should I go upstairs? Right?
Yeah.
And I struggle with that even today. But I'd say that's
how do you scale yourself and give the space to your team to do what they need to do?
And you've got to let go. You've got to enable your team, and you've got to let go, and you've got to trust them. But you've also got to keep your eye on the fact that you have, like we have a team now, like we're like 55, 60 people and hiring like crazy. And it's like I have to care about the whole company and everybody's mortgage, right? And I think about that. So you can't always think about individuals as much as they would necessarily want, because you have to always consider the whole, and there's just a lot of variables in that, which I think I never realized that you'd need that amount of emotional intelligence. And I think for me, like, I don't think I entered this with any of that, like, at all, like none. You know,
how do you think you went about acquiring it? Like, is it just like trial and error of learning, or did you intentionally like, or are there any kind of intentional tips and tricks you?
It's a lot of failures, and I think a lot of it's about hiring the right people around me that can support me. Like my fellow colleague Quentin, who's our COO, is just a really happy, vibrant person. I'm a little bit more on the miserable side. So we bounce off of each other, and he's much more of a people nurturer than me, whereas I'm much more of a person that drives people up mountains, right? So, but you need that kind of balance, and I have that with my CTO as well. Like, she's very placid and everything else, whereas I'm kind of a bit of aggressive. And it's about, that's the biggest thing, has been finding these key people in the company that can balance you. But until you really understand who you are, it's hard to understand what you need. So there's a lot of introspection, and within that becomes, you know, I say I don't have imposter syndrome, but you do, when you introspect stuff like that, it's very easy to beat yourself up, and you have to be careful not to do that, because you are what you are and you can't change it.
Yeah, I mean, I love that the kind of self-awareness piece that you're talking about, because I agree that you need to know yourself well enough to understand like your strengths and weaknesses and what you kind of need around you to amplify impact, right? So part of building the right team that's like, you know, better than you in all the ways that they should be, you kind of have to also understand what you're naturally good at and where to double down, and what weaknesses you have too. And then, you know, constantly evolve. Like, to your point, there's just so much consistent learning, right? Like growth mindset is so
and I think
important.
Everyone, you know, it's like children, and you must know it yourself with your peers. Like, everybody grows at different, you know, stages and does different things at different stages of their life. And I don't think, you know, like, you could say, well, God, she should know. She's like mid-40s. Surely you've got to understand who the hell you are. And no, like, I'm just the same as you. Like, I make lots of mistakes all the time, right? And you know, really big ones, right? Yeah. Like, I don't think people have it. I don't think that, you know, I think 20-year-olds can have it sussed completely, and 50, 60-year-olds don't. You know, some of us don't, right? Like, it doesn't matter your age. And it depends what you're doing, you know, as to how good you're going to be at it.
Totally. And there's always more to learn. There's never like an end point of learning, right? I
think that's the nice thing about technology, and the wonderful thing about Shopify, honestly, is that, you know, it's extensible, right? And we're seeing like it keep moving, and I'm a person that loves change and loves new tech, and the Shopify ecosystem is fantastic for that. I mean, and, you know, sitting there on some of it, which, you know, like the gaming side, I mean, I wish I had more time, you know, like my kids are doing all that and sort of talk to me about it. And it's like, you know, the fact Shopify is getting into these different areas and exploring, you know, they're just willing to think differently and all that. And I think that's a great place to be, because you are going to keep on learning, but you need to want to do it, right? You need to want to learn. Yeah. But
so shifting gears a little bit, Karen, like, tell me, what are you most excited about for the future, both in the shipping industry itself and for ShipperHQ specifically?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting with COVID, you know, and how that's accelerated commerce online, and I really think that shift's here to stay. You know, like everything, I really like the way now that kind of before there was still this kind of, I don't know, people getting in a room and it was a little bit stuffy and we all had to think about it, and a lot of red tape, and it feels like now everything's just going faster, right? And people are just like, we got to do this now. And I think that that's the single biggest thing that's really great, that you can now get on conversations with, you know, people all levels and have proper chats. But in terms of shipping itself, I mean, the experience in the checkout It's never been more important. Like, we need to know when that parcel is going to arrive, otherwise we're not going to purchase it. It's as simple as that. And it just, at this point, like, the word needs to get out there to get this solved. Like, and I think that the Amazon, as you know, with Shopify, I mean, just what an interesting space to watch, and around the fulfillment side as well. And from a lot of this hinges around shipping, and how that works, and how quickly we can get it there, whether we need to get it there quickly, etc. And I'm really excited to see what Shopify does, especially around marketplaces and into the fulfillment space as we walk forwards, and then how ShipperHQ can enable that for our merchants in the best possible way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I totally agree. I mean, the key is like we want every single independent brand to be able to have and deliver on that delivery experience that customers are expecting more and more. So
yeah,
that's awesome. And ShipperHQ, like, you touched on this a little bit, but like, what's the next kind of frontier you're most excited about inside the company?
Yeah, so we're working a lot around headless technology. I think that's going to be a big thing, and like where you want to shop, I think is incredibly important. So SDKs and components, like move into that kind of architecture, and we've been doing a lot of work there. So I'm pretty excited. The actual data analysis, and I hate the word machine learning because I just think it's programming, but it's that whole kind of data analysis and then how you react to it. So that merchants, like, we see so many stories that are the same. And I think we have enough data now to be able to say to merchants and put in front of them, this is what we think you want to do, rather than us saying, keep asking them what they want to do, or saying, this is a system you can configure it in. I think we can actually predict what they want to do and put options in front of them. And for me, like, that's the kind of probably final frontier that I'll take, with ShipperHQ, but I'm excited for that one. So, yeah.
And what are the primary markets you serve? Like, Karen, I know you yourself, you were in London, the UK, and now you're in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Was that move for the business, or?
Yeah, it was very much driven by the family, and just, we were doing half of the business in America, and, come 6 p.m, the UK team used to switch off, and I was left holding the baby, and literally, like, all of them, and including work. So we moved to the US back in 2013. Yeah, we serve all over the world. I mean, we sell, I don't know what the latest counts is, but it's like, 80 countries or something like that. Our dominant markets are, obviously US, Canada, UK, etc. But Europe is pretty big for us, and we sell out into Asia as well. And, this is a global, everyone needs to shop, right? Like, and everyone needs to ship. So, but it's pretty interesting when you get down to, like, I've had instances like in Africa where we had to do shipping for, literally the parcels were getting put on top of a bus and moving from stop to stop, and somebody come in and said, can you solve that? And it, like, sometimes these challenges, you sit back and you go, oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, the cultural differences in how people engage in commerce is vast, right? Like, it's,
well, yeah, and you see it, in New York, where people are going around on bikes, and the challenges around that, and there's just so many different things going on in different countries, and you think that some places will be less advanced, and actually they're more advanced. Yeah. Especially out in Asia, like, so their e-commerce is crazy out there, and it's a whole different world. But it's interesting because you can take the lessons and apply them back here.
Totally.
So
100%. That's awesome. So Karen, for folks that are listening that are potentially thinking of starting their own businesses, maybe building commerce apps on Shopify, or building in the shipping space, what advice do you have?
I think that, it's a difficult one, right? I think you've really got to want to do it, right? Like, make sure that you really want to do it, because you need a lot of perseverance to jump into this space. But also, like, you need to, like, trust yourself. And if it's something that's like burning away, then that you need to do, then do it. Nobody else is going to change the course of your life. Like, that's under your control. And I think you need to take control of it. And I sat for many years kind of frustrated in a job and didn't take that jump. And I would say, if you feel too many days frustrated, and you think you have a route out, then take it, right? But I'd say, well, when you're in the business, keep your head down and kind of stay away from the lights, right? Like you got
the shiny distractions.
Well, yeah, anything like that. Like, just try and stay as much of who you are and being humble and respecting other people and what that is, right? I think sometimes their egos get in the way of the business, and that's never good for the business. And I think, like, lastly, my advice is kind of find your happy place, because it's very easy, and I feel this pressure sometimes, like, especially with investment, it's very easy to kind of feel like you should be doing what everybody else is doing. But
right.
This is your life and your journey, and what makes you happy doesn't necessarily make the next person happy. And I think there's too much pressure nowadays on where to just keep climbing the next mountain, and sometimes a mountain's got a great view, maybe you should stay there.
Right.
And I think, figuring that out, I am a person that keeps looking to the next mountain, so I should preach this to myself, but I will say that, have a good reason to do that, because it's disruptive, keep climbing, so you have to find, where's good, right? Because otherwise you're never happy. And I see that with a lot of entrepreneurs, where they're never truly happy,
And you kind of have to, in Shy Shopify lately, we've been talking a lot about infinite and finite games. It's like you kind of need to know what your infinite game is and the horizon, that you're working towards that doesn't really have an end, but you can keep working towards. And then you also need to know, in the context of that, like, what are the mountains that you're climbing, or what are the finite games you're trying to win? Because putting that into perspective helps you sort of balance, like, what you're actually working towards and what the greater mission of your own life is, right?
You've got to live your life within what you're doing, and I've spent time where I've not done that, and I do regret it. There's been times when I've missed seeing my kids doing things and things like that, but I've learned from that, and I still make that mistake probably, but I think about it a lot. So that's a really good description that you've got of it. Yeah, that's exactly it.
So Karen, on that note though, like, what is the thing that kind of gets you out of bed every day about ShipperHQ? Like, what's that thing that you realized is a really strong guiding light for yourself?
There's no boundaries, right? Like, when you and that's the thing about Shopify as well. Like I feel like there's no leashes on me, and I can get up and we can go, and I love that about the company, and I hope the staff feel that as well. And it's just that, right? Like, and I'm sure you feel that, right? In where you're working, like, it's the greatest feeling ever of getting up and caring about the customers. And I really, like, a lot of the customers are my friends, and like, you build a personal connection with them, and I feel a responsibility to them. So if I don't want to, if I'm not excited to kind of jump up the mountain, then it's a responsibility to the customers that gets me moving in the morning as well, right?
Right. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Karen. This was an awesome chat. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. For the folks who listened in, thanks for joining us, and please tune in again next week for more Founders Talks on Beyond the Build. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. You're fantastic.
Likewise.